Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is our second time we're doing this talk, so hopefully we have a little bit more idea of how to schedule it. But I think we're going to go through talking about the campaign that we're leading called Shutdown ICE, and kind of what's been our experience since we launched it last year in 2018, August 2018, what's happened since, and how y'all can join or find out more, join the fight if you want to. But thank you so much again for coming out tonight. I know it's pretty cold. Hopefully we can figure out ways to shut down ICE together. With that being said, my name is Arely Diaz. I'm an organizer with the FANG Collective and this coalition called the Alliance to Mobilize Our Resistance, which is based in Providence. And I come from a mixed status family that's currently living in Rhode Island. So this is a very personal campaign for me.
Hi, my name is Sherry Andre, and I'm one of the co-founders of the FANG Collective. And also a couple of things, reasons why this is important to me is also from a mixed status family. Additionally, I am a student at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, which is down the street from the Bristol County House of Corrections, and so feel that because I'm a student and having access to education in that area and access to academic resources, it's my responsibility to utilize my privilege to take action. And historically have worked with undocumented folks who have experienced domestic violence and sexual assault, and have seen how the system has treated them throughout their process of trying to seek justice.
I'm Holly. I'm a member of the FANG Collective as well, and this issue is really important to me because my family came here escaping programs in Russia, and the history continues here today. So I want to be an ally in this fight.
Now we're going to talk about a little bit about FANG, then about AMOR, which is the coalition that I mentioned earlier, and then we're going to talk about the campaign itself. So pass it on to Sherry.
So the FANG Collective started almost 6 years ago now. We were trying to have a 5-year anniversary party. We're not very good at organizing parties, but good at organizing other things. So if anybody's interested in organizing a party, let us know. So about 6 years ago, we started the FANG Collective as an organization focused on utilizing whatever tactics community members wanted to use to fight fracked gas infrastructure projects along the East Coast in a collaborative way, acknowledging that we all come from different backgrounds trying to do this work, and notice that a lot of white folks in the environmental movement were not creating space for low-income folks or folks of color to talk about how they can utilize direct action as a tactic for folks who feel that the only form of social capital they have is their bodies. They can't have money to file lawsuits every time they want to do something. They don't have a voice that can be heard, but historically within their own communities, direct action has been a tactic that's been utilized and was respected, and they want to use it. Or they wanted to have a conversation about how they could support other people who felt that they could utilize their privilege to do direct action. And so we started off as an environmental-based organization, but always organizing at these intersections of acknowledging that climate change impacts folks of color more than it does other folks, and also just like the identities of our organization are predominantly queer and folks of color. And so trying to organize at the intersections of their needs while also creating a holistic healing space of resistance, utilizing direct action as a form of healing in itself. As Mary goes back to me to talk about.
FANG is one of the 6 founding member organizations of AMOR. There's 5 other groups that joined up and created AMOR in 2017. And Basically, AMOR is a rapid response network that provides community-based resources for people that are experiencing some form of state violence, whether it be from their open immigration case, having a loved one get detained or get deported, or experiencing some form of police violence or racism. So depending on individual circumstance, we mobilize to make sure that we can give the person like the kind of support that they need. And we have built like an infrastructure and a network around different ways that we can support people. The biggest issue that we've been tackling right now has been immigration. People with open immigration cases, especially people with past criminal records, have found themselves very exposed, obviously, to all the policies that have come out against undocumented people. So we've been trying to, connect people with legal resources, figure out how to pay for these legal resources, and if they're detained, figure out how to get them out, figure out how to get them to, find a way that their case can stay open so that they're not deported if they're already detained. While we're doing that work and supporting people with their immigration cases, we noticed, right, that all people that are Rhode Island residents that are eventually detained by ICE, right, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, are not detained within the state itself. And that's because Rhode Island has one detention center, which many of you might know, it's the White Detention Center in Central Falls, but Central Falls cannot hold Rhode Island residents. They're all sent to Massachusetts, which holds 4 detention centers, and is pretty much the nexus, the hub of detention within all of the Northeast. The only other state within the Northeast that has a detention center is New Hampshire, that's in Dover, which is around only 2 hours away. So pretty much if you're in Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, you're going to get sent to Massachusetts. Obviously, Massachusetts, you're going to be sent to the 4 detention centers in Massachusetts. Basically we found ourselves, figuring out how to mobilize ourselves across state lines now, because that's where our people are being sent to, and that's where we're getting calls from, and people are saying my person's all the way over here, how do I get there, and figure out visitation processes and all that stuff. So we're figuring out locally how to provide resources for people that are based here. We're also noticing, right, that a lot of the people in Rhode Island are being held in Massachusetts. And that's where, right, this campaign ties into AMOR's work. AMOR has a campaign called Shutdown ICE that's focused on ensuring first that the people that are being held at the ICE, who are mainly asylum seekers from based in other states, have access to legal resources and other forms of like mental health support, which is not being provided right now. And also working towards the eventual ending of the ICE contract, and obviously then go to shut down the facility as a whole. But there wasn't a capacity, right, being based here in Rhode Island to also have a campaign based in all these detention centers and all these different contracts happening in Massachusetts. And that's where FANG comes in with, right, the Shutdown ICE campaign, which focuses on these detention centers in Massachusetts, which, through research, through functioning this campaign, are mainly existing prisons within counties that are being led by these very racist sheriffs who have signed on to these programs and contracts that allow their prisons to also function as detention centers as well. And that's pretty much how Massachusetts has become the hub of detention throughout the Northeast, is presiding on through these programs that came along after this huge bill in 1996 was passed and signed by Bill Clinton, which opened up the doors for law enforcement agencies, local law enforcement agencies, to collaborate with ICE and do their work for them as well. I don't know if you want to say anything about that. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I guess just, it was sort of stated earlier, but then in last August, the FANG Collective launched the Shutdown ICE campaign that specifically targeted Bristol County, but has expanded to other counties that hold a 287G agreement and IGSA agreements, both of which Riley will talk about. But we started that campaign to really continue to put pressure and to stress the importance of ending those contracts, and also to make people aware of those contracts. Just like the other day, I heard on Democracy Now! There was a case of a woman who has cancer who's being held, and he talked about the 287G agreements, but just in the public, I think in the public media in general, there isn't enough attention around how these contracts are operating, and people, I think more and more people need to understand the importance of them, so that if they shut down, there's less enforcement. Yeah.
And I guess like another thing about the Shutdown ICE campaign in conjunction with MORE is that MORE has the Shutdown Wyatt campaign, as well as like each case that comes through becomes in itself a campaign, and requires so much support from an organization or a collaborative organization that only has 2 organizers for the entire state of Rhode Island, and including taking on cases from Massachusetts, because now our community members are being held in Massachusetts, which means they're also meeting other people who need to utilize resources, and then they're reaching back out to more. So just like want to acknowledge and uplift the work of MORE and like Lee and Kaka who work there, and just like give them a lot of credit, and why it's so important, like not that our Shutdown ICE campaign even exists, that anybody does any extra work to target these facilities is really beneficial, because we can't expect 2 people to do all of that work.
So now I'm going to get into little about the agreements and the contracts, and they can be very messy and they look very different in other states and sometimes. But just want to do a quick, before I jump into the contracts that exist in Massachusetts, talk a little bit about why it is that Rhode Island residents are not being held in Rhode Island in the Wyatt Detention Center. It's already exists there, it makes sense to have them here. That's because Rhode Island residents, before the Wyatt functions through contracts primarily to the U.S. Marshal Service, meaning that if it had no contracts with these law enforcement agents, these other agencies, federal agencies, it would basically go bankrupt and shut down. That's how it functions. It gets contracts, gets money from these contracts, and then pays back its bondholders from all the money that's invested. And due to like semi-private, semi-public existence of it, it means that Rhode Island residents all go, if you're incarcerated, if you have a charge, you go to the ACI, right? That's in Cranston. There's no contract between the state and Wyatt to hold people there. This is primarily a facility that holds people for the U.S. Marshal Service. So it's the same way as this weird, fuzzy legal jurisdiction thing where people that are from Rhode Island are not going to be held here, they're going to be sent somewhere else because of like the existence, for the fact that Wyatt is a semi-private facility. All these other facilities in Massachusetts are public because they're county jails, right? They're county prisons. So it's a little bit fuzzy, but what you need to know is that Rhode Island folks are not being held there for ICE. They're being held in Massachusetts, as I mentioned, and they're being held primarily, they're there due to these IGSA agreements, which stand for intergovernmental service agreements. And these are the agreements that allow facilities, public prisons, to become detention centers. And basically, the sheriff will sign a contract stating the amount of beds that they have open for this, or the amount of beds that they need to fill. And they'll get a certain amount for each person that's detained in the facility. For example, at the facility in Bristol County House of Corrections, where the majority of people that we've been in contact have been to, they currently have a contract for $98 per person that's detained in that facility. So that's the IGSA, which functions to incarcerate and to separate families. And the other agreement is the 287G agreement. And this is the main agreements that we are targeting as a campaign, because their sole function is not to receive any profit or revenue, right, for the city. which I can talk about the technicalities of how even that's fucked. But mainly the 287G agreement served to terrorize communities that one, have some kind of interaction with the criminal justice system from where there are agreements, but just to instill fear in undocumented communities in general. 287G agreements essentially allow local law enforcement agents to become deputized immigration agents. It gives them the authority to basically, once a person gets in contact with them, to check for their status, to check if there's a detainer, and then to hold them for ICE. So facilities do not need to have, counties do not need to have both agreements. One place can have one and not the other. So one place can function as a detention center, but doesn't have this 287G agreement, which basically has immigration agents within its county. But often these places will have both. Places like Bristol County have both. Places like Plymouth County have both. And there are other places that don't have them. So Suffolk County, which is in Boston, recently just ended its contract, its IGSA contract, which allowed it to become a detention center. But that ended. Now people are getting transferred to Bristol County and to the Wyatt as well. So currently, there's a bunch of counties that have them all across the United States. But these are the agreements that we're targeting because they're solely there's the sole reason they exist is to terrorize communities. And the program has existed, like I said, since 1996, and it's touted as a very a public safety measure for sheriffs that love to spew this anti-immigrant and xenophobic rhetoric all over the news. So this is where we've been targeting these agreements in specific. Because we understand that IGSA contracts are a little bit more technical and difficult to break from, but it is possible. Suffolk County just ended theirs, and that's the goal, right? That we end this tactic to terrorize communities, and then we go for the detention center itself. Exactly, and these can be ended at any time. Most of these 287G agreements went up for expiration this past June. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we mobilize ourselves to make people aware of that. And most of the places that had them still decided to resign. But they can end them at any time. Either ICE or the county itself can decide to break from this agreement at any moment. And so just to talk about the IGSA agreement in terms of money, right? Basically, they negotiate how much money they're going to receive per person detained, but often the amount of money it takes, right, to ensure that a person that's being incarcerated has healthy amount of food, decent amount of food, is able to receive services, etc., is much more than the amount that they've negotiated in the contract. And so what it means is that they're holding people in these terrible conditions. People are dying across the nation in facilities such as these. People on the inside are often taking action themselves to ensure that they have access to the things that they're supposed to have, but are not receiving because this is all just a cash flow for them in terms of disagreement. Are there any questions about that? I know it's very technical and it's a lot of, yeah.
Are those both public and private prisons can be part of the IGSA agreement?
Yes, yeah. Well, for a private facility, no, actually, I'll correct myself. IGSAs are only with public facilities. Private prisons are able to get contracts from ICE directly. It's a different process. Luckily, we don't have to deal with that in Massachusetts. The Wyatt is a little bit iffy on that, but it's still an IGSA because the Wyatt is a half private facility, half public, and so we can make a public contract.
Okay.
And then the rest of Massachusetts is also public.
Okay. So through the half part of Wyatt that is public, there's just
Exactly. Yeah. Wyatt is very unique. Yeah.
How is Wyatt half public, half private?
Oh boy, okay. So basically, and then there's some folks in the audience that I know have probably have some. Well, we actually talked about this recently, but the Central Fall, no. There's a corporation. Basically, there's a corporation that supposedly, they call themselves a nonprofit entity, which allows them to make these public contracts with like these federal agencies and stuff. But they also are get invested with bonds, and these private firms, investment firms, are able to invest with bonds, which is what makes them, I think, makes them accountable to these private firms, right, that are asking for a return on their money and their investment. So there's a private aspect to it, which is what makes it accountable to these investment firms that are putting money in. And how it gets that money out to these investment firms is by these contracts. Does that make sense? So the reason why it signed on to this ICE contract again this year, they had one before, it got canceled by ICE because a person died in detention. They renewed it this year because they need money to pay back a huge debt that they owe to these bondholders. So they're in debt, you know, and we're hoping that we can bankrupt them and then like they can just shut down. But that's how they get their cash flow. That's how they get the money. It's through these contracts, and they don't do it just because they're racist. It's also because they owe a huge amount of money. So. But yeah, everyone's racist. Everyone that invested in ICE, I'm sorry, is racist. Yes, that's the truth. Does that make sense though? It's also like, do you want to comment on that, Jim?
I think you did a good job. It's very confusing.
It's very
confusing on purpose.
Yeah. It's not transparent, and I think it's been a process for us to try to figure how to sort everything out. We're going to FOIA them. Maybe we get more information. But why, like I said, is unique. It's a very, very unique facility here in Rhode Island. I don't think there's anything like it anywhere else. I could be wrong. Definitely not in Massachusetts, which is what we're focusing on this campaign. It's a little bit more clear cut because it's a program, right? It's a federal program. The 287G and the IGSAs, but yeah, if you want to learn more about white specifically, I think we can
sign up on that sheet.
Sign up on the sheet. Maybe we'll see about doing like a public, like one of these, public t-shirt on the way and around the messiness of it. But if anyone else has more information, please. I'm definitely not the sole authority or whatever on anything. I'll do everything. Sorry.
I don't have any information, I just have another question. 287G agreements, you said that the cities or counties don't profit from them, so what's the incentive to Howard?
The incentive is this public safety like argument that they make, right? Of saying that like even if you don't have a 287G agreement, law enforcement agencies still communicate, right, with federal agencies around detainers, but 287G gives them an additional layer of communication, right? It's definitely, it's saying our county officers are going to fully follow all these detainers. It's like the anti-sanctuary city program. I'll put it that way, right? If sanctuary cities tell local law enforcement agencies not to uphold all immigration, like most immigration detainers, that people are incarcerated for anything, right? For a traffic violation, for petty theft, etc. 287G says, we're gonna hold you. And actually, even if there's no immigration detainer, we're gonna look and search all these databases to see if there's a chance that you could be detained. They're going extra steps to ensure that people are caught up in this immigration system. And that's the authority, like the power it gives them. So, yeah, anti-sanctuary city is what it is. And actually the sheriff of Bristol County is a huge opponent of sanctuary cities, hates them. He's like, Thomas Hobbes is a horrible person. And he's gone to other states to talk about how you shouldn't have sanctuary cities anyway. So that's essentially what it is and why they sign on to it.
I think it's also like if you want to, and also if you want to think about it, like why was it necessary for the Providence Police Department to have a secret gang database that they would store all of our documentation in? Like when I've gotten arrested, they take pictures of all my tattoos to see if they can like run through them in a system, right? So like it's just like an extra step that allowed them to enforce like their oppression on us and to see if there's other ways that they can incriminate people of color and black folks.
I have a little info about Wyatt, I think. Like when it was first, so the only way they could have built the detention facility was either, like if the government can't take out a big bond without like a population vote basically. So like the way they were able to build it was like the government created like a nonprofit and then like nonprofit can take out a bond without a vote, so it's kind of like a way of skirting like instead from the rest of the state. And that's what the private persons are trying to do now with the government. It's like they're building the facilities now and it's like a way for the government not to have to like ask the population if they want new jails and prisons. It's like, you know, spend like time like that.
Thank you.
So yeah.
And I guess just want to say why, important that we focus on these places in Massachusetts, even though they're out of state, is because we do, we know people and family members that are detained there, and obviously family members that are based here and are figuring out how to support loved ones that are hours away now. Bristol County is the closest one that exists right now. And it makes it very difficult for them. If a person's going to be detained for months and months on end, or years on end sometimes, they have to figure out, one, how to transport themselves to these counties that are very far away, if they can at all. And the rates for doing phone calls and such is extremely high. In some places criminal. In Bristol County, there's a lawsuit for how they've been having contracts with this telephone agency that charges ridiculous rates for phone calls. So it really does put a huge burden on the family members, right, that are trying to figure out how to communicate with the person inside, to even figure out how to get their case going forward. And then you have to figure out with lawyers how to get lawyers that are willing to visit people in clinics or visit people all the way, Dover sometimes, New Hampshire. So it's very difficult for the people, obviously on the inside. It's very difficult for the family members that are on the outside, and it's difficult for the advocates themselves who have to figure out how to navigate all of these things all at once. So that's why we're focusing on these, and I think it's important that we realize that, yeah, there's something happening here, obviously locally in Wyatt, but there's 4 places that are holding people in Massachusetts, and it's affecting us too.
Great. So how's everybody feeling? A lot of information. We did a great job. Thanks for spelling it out for us. I feel like I relearn it every time. We're going to talk a little bit about what our direct actions have been targeting Bristol County. And I just want to preface this by saying there's going to be images of police violence. So people will try to be mindful of it before this slide comes up. Maybe the second slide, the third slide is after this one. So this will count as 1, then the second one is fine, and then the third one is police violence. And then also just want to say that there are many different types of tactics to resist something and to fight something. Direct action is a tactic that we choose to use, but it is not the only one that we choose to use. This is just the one we're talking about tonight. There are so many other ways in which we have been fighting different entities for a long time, but tonight we're talking specifically about direct action. It's a tactic that we believe in. I'm not going to argue with anybody about whether or not you think it's a good idea or not, and I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just telling you what my experience has been. We'll all collectively tell you what our experience has been. And yes, I just wanted to preface that by saying that, what am I going to say before we get into this? You have the notes slide? Okay, great. So, and another reason why we do direct action in Bristol County is because, and a lot of people are like, well, why don't you just vote the sheriff out? Well, I can't vote in Massachusetts. I can't vote, and I don't have a say as to where my community members in Providence go. So that's like another thing. And there's also a lot of community groups there who have been petitioning, writing letters to the editor, who've been
Like 24 years.
for 24 years. People have been using traditional organizing tactics, and the sheriff has prevailed there. And so just being really mindful of all of the work and labor that they're doing and finding ways to support them and utilizing those tactics will be utilized ours. And so in August of last year, we participated in this action. We carried out in solidarity with folks detained by ICE in Bristol County who were on a hunger strike to demand better conditions. And when this action was happening, Sheriff Hodgson was at an event with Donald Trump. They're BFFs. He loves Trump.
Why? And Trump loves him.
And Trump loves him.
No, he's advised a lot of the policy around the 287G agreements. Like, he uses this as like a model example for the rest of the country.
So last August, myself and Holly and our friends blockaded the exits and entrances of the Bristol County House of Corrections. We launched two 26-foot tripods and two folks locked to the back gates, stopping the flow of people coming in and out of the facility temporarily. And for the camera, a very short time, since I'm going to trial for this, they were stopped for a short time. My lawyer's right here. Trying to be mindful of what I say about that action. And this action was, I think, successful in that it was able to bring attention to the hunger strike and redirect, and I think it's really important that when we utilize direct action, the narrative isn't ours. How do we redirect the narrative in the press to the people who are in the facility? And so, again, redirecting to the folks who released a statement about the hunger strike, redirecting to the conditions that are in the facility and not taking the publicity for ourselves is really important. And I think that was really important to us as well. Do you have anything to say?
So I'm going to read a piece of the letter that was received from folks that were being detained and that were on hunger strike, and then was later read outside of Hodgson's house. But I'll read a piece of it and then we'll pass it around so other people can read the rest of it because it's kind of long. I have a lot to say about the system. What we need in here is the support from people and organizations on the outside to help us raise our voice to denounce the system. We've been kidnapped. We need people to go on TV stations, radio, and social media. We need people to use every tool they might have at their disposal to help us that have been kidnapped by ICE for years to stop the virus that has spread all over the USA. I sometimes blame those of us who have been in there and got a chance to go home and did nothing after, even having witnessed the atrocity, the treatment, the unhealthy food. In county jail, we are detained with other inmates without having committed a crime. We live in the same building, we share the bathrooms, we share the living conditions, unsanitary bathrooms shared by 80 to 100 detainees, inmates. There is no privacy here, flies, bugs all over our faces while we are in the shower or the bathroom. When we use the bathroom, the next person could be right up to our face brushing their teeth. There's one toenail clipper per 100 who live here. Nothing is sanitized. we are not entitled to extra clothes. Things are not supposed to be there for no cost. Things that are supposed to be there for no cost are being sold in commissary. The items are so expensive that we can't even buy them. I'll pass around the rest of the letter for people to read.
And I want to say that this was in August 2018 when this action happened. It was the kickoff action for the campaign. It was also when the national prison strike last year was being carried out by folks all across the, in prisons everywhere, demanding better conditions, range of demands. And what was very, I think, interesting about this particular hunger strike that was happening from the people that were detained by ICE in the facility was that after they began their hunger strike, people that were being incarcerated there, not by ICE, just incarcerated there, also joining the hunger strike in an act of solidarity with them. And that's something that we also, try to talk about every time that we do an action or we have an event, is that we want this contract to end, but our goal is to obviously shut down the detention center, but also make sure that the people that are incarcerated there get out too. We don't want this facility to exist, period, especially under the leadership of this man, of any sheriff. Just because, incarceration is incarceration. They're all being incarcerated by one institution or another.
And then the next slide, there's police violence. Some folks want to close their eyes or look away. During this action, I was pulled down from my tripod and physically harmed by the police utilizing pain compliance to try to force me out of my lockbox that I had locked into from above. And I haven't really talked about it a lot publicly, and I'm trying to be better about talking about it because I'm going to have to talk about it during my trial. But was beat up a little by the police and had men standing over me with knives cutting all of my gear off of me. And it was an incredibly scary experience, and it did not release and it did not unlock. So they dragged me off to the side so that they could remove the rest of my gear after they were able to take these poles down. They took these poles down by just pulling them out and away from each other. So if you've ever had a camera tripod and you just open it way too much, my body just slammed down to the ground and I landed on my tailbone. And the other person who was in the other tripod, they took her down first and all of her poles landed on her body. And she had some brain trauma from that action as well. And then Holly participated in the back part. I don't think you want to share specific about it.
No, just continued intimidation and also, in comparison to being smashed down by poles, it was not nearly as violent, but definitely holding our hands down, pulling up the canine truck as close as possible so that we could hear dogs barking while they jackhammered us for a while. Yeah.
So that was the action. We were arrested. 2 folks, Holly included, have served 10 days in jail. I don't want to speak about it for you if you want to share anything, but had served 10 days in jail, and I'll probably talk about it. Our third co-defendant was charged $3,000 in restitution, and we're raising money for her. And that restitution is for overtime for the police officers. And we tried to fight the restitution because we don't want to pay the police, but it's really hard to win anything in Bristol County. You go to their jail, or go through their court system. And I am going to trial on January 7th and 8th, and I'm facing 10 to 30 days in jail for this action.
Yeah, I think one thing that, just to highlight, like when I went into jail at Bristol County, first of all, people were all very supportive of the hunger strike. People knew about the hunger strike. It's universal that Sheriff Hodgson is very, very disliked in the jail. And I just want to talk a little bit, I guess, about, I got a letter. I think one of the important things that I learned in the process of going through the system is just seeing how harshly and unfair people are treated. And so like right when I was brought in, once I was brought over to the jail, I met a woman who had been, a woman of color who had been on vacation in Springfield and then got pulled over, wasn't driving the car, was in the car, and was told that they had a warrant from 14 years ago. And I saw her, it was the third place that she was being held that like over the course of several days. And then at that point she was being forced to remove her hair because she was going in, and it was just like the most dehumanizing moment because she started crying about the fact that she had surgery in her head and that she didn't want to take her hair out. And thankfully in that moment, the guards let me make I intervened and asked if I could post bail for her to leave that night because it was $100, and the guards said that I could make another phone call. I'd already made a phone call and was able to call jail support, and they were able to post bail for her and get her out in that situation. And I guess I share that story because after that happened, the guards looked at me and said, I've never experienced that before, and why did you do that? Like, what was the reason behind that? And I think it's just important that if you're participating in direct actions and you're putting yourself into the system, that you're also, that's an act, you're actively involved the whole time. And it was a really important moment. I think it did both impact that person, but also impact the people within the system to be stopped within like what they were doing and kind of question the moment. But just in general, the entire process of being in jail is like extremely dehumanizing, and it's, yeah. I guess I could read the letter, but we can wait till afterwards. But I think just yeah, the conditions are really bad, and I can, later on, I guess I'll read a letter that I got from one of the people that was inside. But I think the process of fighting both people being held by ICE and detention centers is just like intrinsically linked with incarceration and prisons, and they can't be separated, and so it has to be a part of the conversation constantly.
Next is an action that we did during the so-called Thanksgiving morning outside of the sheriff's house. We decided that, if people were going to be spending this holiday, incarcerated and detained under him, that we should make it known that this was happening under him and that he, this was on his watch. And he came out, we went outside during the morning and read that letter that Holly read. We read the full thing. And he came out and he started filming us, and then a whole bunch of Dartmouth police came out to just observe. And then he went on this radio station, interviewed him after this action happened, and he made these veiled threats, talking about, that he has a gun, he knows how to use it because he's a cop, blah blah blah, and how basically when we go to people's house, that we should expect to be treated with violence. And very much encouraging people to take up, take on violence if, you know, they feel like we're crossing the line in terms of what kind of actions we're doing, because that's a great response. But that was just, you know, an action that we decided to do. Might happen again, I don't know. This was a demonstration that happened during a week of action to end Southeast Asian deportations last year. It happened right in front of the prison itself. So for folks that don't know, there's a huge deportation crisis happening with a lot of Southeast Asian countries. Right now, a lot of Cambodian folks are being targeted. There's a good amount of Cambodian folks in Providence, in other cities in Rhode Island. And so we're seeing that people who have been here for their whole life came here as refugees due to the Vietnam War, right? Often grew up in refugee camps and came here as refugees during the Vietnam War, because of the Vietnam War, and, you know, are losing status as refugees because of these repatriation agreements that are happening between countries of the United States. Are losing their status, or committed some, you know, have a criminal record for something in the past, are now going up for deportation, getting deported at very, very high rates, like a 400% increase in the past few years. Just for, you know, minor things or things that happened like way long ago, they served time, you know, they've done their time or have families have roots here, and they're just getting deported. So the Southeast Asian community has, you know, gotten together to figure out ways to support their folks from Laos, their folks from Vietnam, Cambodia, Thai, that are being affected by this deportation crisis that's happening right now. So, because they're just slowly starting to see their numbers decline because of what's happening. And it's very sad and fucked up. So, we did a demo out there to hold solidarity with them because there are Southeast Asian folks being held in this facility. Yeah, well, yes, so far. And in one case, there was a Cambodian man that was held in Plymouth County who had 287G, was deported to Cambodia, and then died in a car crash over there. So it's just a very huge tragedy. Yeah, the family raised money to bring his body back to the United States after that. So it's just, it's really messed up how, you know, all these things are linked, to say the least. I'll stop cussing. Sorry. This next action was a town hall that happened at Bristol County. Basically, when these counties have these 287G agreements, in order to kind of quell the community around them that actively opposes the agreement, they hold these town halls, these open meetings that are supposed to be open to anyone in the public. But in this case, you have to RSVP way in advance with ICE itself. Basically, they hold these town halls to talk about the necessity of the program, to throw out all these numbers and stats around how many people were detained, how many people were deported, from what country, blah, blah, blah. And it's terrible. You know, it's just a sheriff and ICE talking about how great this program is and why we need it. And so we decided to RSVP ourselves. And you know, basically trying to give a statement out about what's happening and why we feel like this agreement needs to end. As concerned community members, there were plenty of community members there as well, calling for the end to it as well. But instead of allowing us to stay our peace, they decided to quickly grab us and throw us out, and then arrest us on the spot and then take us to the local jail immediately. And so it's just, you know, during a public meeting, if you stand up, you're going to get grabbed, tossed, put up against a K-9 car just for trying to say, hey, I don't like this agreement. So that's just kind of, you know, Bristol County, we did our first action, we saw the violence. It's like, they'll mess with you even for like the smallest thing. It's terrible. And so the next thing that we organized after that was a week of action during the final week of June. As I had mentioned, a lot of these 287 contracts were set to expire on June 30th. Bristol County included all of the ones in Massachusetts were set to expire. So we decided to launch this week of action to ensure that we showed up and resisted them in all the places that had them. We tried to hit every single place that had an active 287G agreement or some kind of contract with ICE in general. And show that opposition, show that resistance happening. Just because, if no one's doing it, they're just going to keep silent, right? If people are just letting them do it, they don't even consult with the community about these agreements. They just do it. And so, we feel like it's important to let them know that we don't want them to continue. And obviously a lot of them are signed, but as Sherry mentioned, they can end at any time. And so it's just decided to mobilize around this time frame.
Also during the week of action, we had a call-in day to the Bristol County District Attorney urging them to stop prosecuting folks who've taken action. And I think one thing I want to say, particularly, I know I can speak for myself, I think some folks I've met in movement spaces are like, why are you trying to not go to jail? Well, one, no one wants to go to jail, but that's not why I'm going to trial. I'm going to trial because I don't believe that I should be charged for what I was being charged for and being treated the way I was being treated through the system. And I think it was, and we'll talk more about it in terms of court cases, though I'm not just talking about it now, I just want to talk about it later. It's just that, depending on who you are and what your values are, you're going to make choices. And for me, my values tell me that I'm not going to pay restitution because I don't believe in paying money to the cops because I don't. What?
What's restitution?
Restitution is when the prosecution tries to charge you money for your action or any expenses, quote unquote expenses that might have happened during your action. So they wanted to charge me for overtime for the police officers. In my mind, they were going to get paid anyway, so I don't think I need to pay them. But so for me, it's really important in terms of my own personal values to keep fighting it as long as I can through all of the avenues that I can to fight it. To also let other people know that you don't have to take shitty deals if you participate in direct action, and that this is a potential outcome, and maybe it'll be an example for somebody in the future. And also, I think it gives my lawyer a lot of experience in this, and we need good lawyers who can do this, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to say that. So we did have this call-in day, but it's also to put pressure on this DA who is also just really chummy with the sheriff, and we wanted him to know that we're watching and we acknowledge that this relationship between you two are happening. Yeah, so just wanted to say that.
Sorry,
This was the last day of the week of action. There was a big demonstration outside of the Bristol County jail, and it was really exciting because I had just gotten out of jail, and so it was nice to be on the other side of it. But also, there was a lot of people. The sheriff came out for a little while and stood by the front of the jail, and that's just, he's just so smug, and it was just he's just very smug. But we had a band out. It was just a really great way to end the week of action and continue to bring attention to the jail. And we had a bunch of people speak from the community, a bunch of different groups that are doing work out there, and yeah.
And then, do people need to stretch or something? It's a lot of information. Sorry, we haven't figured out how to make all of this sound fun. It's a little hard.
Feel free to stretch.
Do the things that you need for your body. There's snacks.
I'm gonna talk through quickly the rest of the direct actions that we've done, not to get deeper into it.
Can we tell you where the bathroom is?
Oh, right, and there's a bathroom down that hall, so if you need to, just walk down that hall. So we show this to let you know what we've done, and but also to show ideas of things that you can do, right, to protest and different ways that you can take action. So first, one of the first things that we did was we did a banner drop in the downtown of Plymouth, legend. And that was the first thing that we did. We took the sign that says like "Welcome to Plymouth" and changed it up a bit. People were very on social media were like, "Wow, I can't believe that's what the actual sign says now." It's like that's not what it says. Yeah, that's in Plymouth, and we don't know how long it stayed up there.
People did Facebook message us and ask us if we could give them the banner so that they could use it in an action. I tried to explain that we didn't know where it was.
It's probably with the police now. Then we did an action in the same place in Plymouth County that, as I mentioned, has both the IGSA 287G, when a person from New Bedford was being held at that facility, and we wanted to show support. And this person was from Dominica, and that was the mission of Dominica. And so we came out there, and a good group of us during this cold day just came on and showed support for Cuthbert, who was eventually deported, unfortunately. Something that we did before Suffolk County in Boston ended its contract was when one of our folks that we had been working with, who was previously held in Bristol County. Started incarcerated in Rhode Island. As soon as he was finished his time, he got picked by ICE right away, like literally right outside the ACI. And then first went to Bristol, then went to Plymouth, then went to Suffolk, basically all over Massachusetts, and he's now in New Hampshire. But while he was in Suffolk, we were able to communicate with him, and we found out about a hunger strike that they had launched there due to the conditions of Suffolk County. And so while they were doing a hunger strike, we were trying to coordinate on the outside how to spread their demands and raise awareness around what was happening on the inside. And we held a noise demo, which that banner, Solidarity with Unit 82, is referring about. And the noise demo is basically an action that you can take from the outside when people are doing actions on the inside, to show support for what's happening on the inside, to show that people are outside are listening, right, that there's support. And it's incredibly important to do noise demo for people on the inside, because often the main way that people get their news sometimes is TV, but mostly radio as well. And when they tune into conservative radio stations, if that's the only thing that's available, they're hearing a lot of negative feedback about what's happening on the outside. And we've been told this, that's why we've been talking about it. But it's important to show that there's positive support, right, for what's happening on the inside, because people can get very demoralized when they're taking actions on the inside, when they hear negative feedback like that. So, this is a hunger strike that ended. It ended after the correction officers and the sheriff were threatening to, one, send the so-called leaders of the hunger strike to solitary confinement, and then did end up sending people to solitary confinement who they targeted as ringleaders. And we're also starting to transfer them out to very distant places. And in the case of the people that we were talking to, it did end up getting transferred. There were some wins from this hunger strike, which they felt very good about. And something that was mentioned to me that I felt like was very cool was that, due to this hunger strike, they were given access to fresh fruit, which I was told that they hadn't received fresh fruit in that unit for years, according to people that have been there for years. So, it just goes to show that people are taking action on the inside, and it's very important to listen to that and do what we can to amplify their message. We're gonna play a quick video of when we got on a call with someone from the inside, and just to show y'all, let them speak for themselves, right, about what they're talking for.
I'm Suffolk County Sheriff Department in Boston, Massachusetts. I was in H2, now I'm in segregation. The reason we want to stress is because it shows a very abuses towards us, and we'll try to bring the issue, try to get the issue resolved, and lieutenant being expected and very abusive towards us. He said we should deal with it and we'll put the grievance in. The grievance now been solved. It's not getting just break the grievance now and just throw it away. And plus, the full hydro energy, there's no condiments, because I saw that some portion is very small, some slides, and again, the TV recessions, the county person have a permit and only allowed to go to the library to go get some books or reading material. We are not allowed to do that. And the common person is allowed to go outside recreation. And they not have privilege to have to come and talk to us instead of using threatening language or forcing the inmate to eat. They have to come and talk to him and answer the reason why we're going to spread and try to resolve the agreement issue. It's not a demand, it's just an agreement issue. That's all. I just want to answer why they treat her as an animal instead of detainee. And why would you retaliate against certain people? Because how can one person control 72 individuals to where they all came to agree that they have to change the way they treat them? That's how we do on hunger strike. It's not just we need 4 individuals to go on hunger strike.
And that is from the noise demo when they were responding to us. When we were outside doing noise, they were like flashing their lights and putting up little signs on the windows. Okay, let's go to these. Yeah.
One thing I want to say is that like a lot of our actions could not have happened if like Lee or other folks from Memorial didn't actually have relationships with people who were inside. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of people are like, well, how do we even do these things? Do you have a relationship? One, do you have a relationship with your community before they even enter the system? Do you know who they are? Are you following them? Are you paying attention to them and taking care of them? Because that's where your organizing should start. Is like, who is in your community? Are you very even aware of who these people are? Because then once they're in the system, you'll notice they're gone, right? They're not there anymore. And so then you can organize around supporting them. But hopefully they never even get there because we're shutting the shit down before that even happens. But it's really important to recognize that. And then I just, again, acknowledging and belaboring the work of more, that a lot of our relationships with the folks inside would not have happened if folks were not actively engaging with people who are on the inside. We wouldn't know what the right way to do the actions are. It's really hard to be in solidarity with people if you're not communicating with them, right? Because then you're not actually in solidarity with them, you're just doing things. And so, and it's not, I don't have to say you shouldn't do things, because sometimes you can't communicate with anybody anywhere, so you need to do things, right? You do what you can, but I think that's one thing that has been really powerful about doing these actions is that there's a connection with somebody who's there, and we're trying to like work really hard to get them that. Mostly more. So yeah, I guess just what I'm saying. And a lot of people are like, how do we even start? Like, I think you just should start by identifying who's your community and how do you protect them. And then if you're in a situation where like, well, none of these people, I didn't think that's ever going to happen to them. That might be because you have too many white people in your community and you maybe need to branch out a little bit more.
This was another disruption of another town hall, but this time at Plymouth County. They were very annoying. Yeah. This was during the week of action, during the middle of it. 2 people blockaded the Massachusetts Department of Corrections headquarters in Milford, Massachusetts, and the reason they did that is because the Massachusetts DOC also has a 287G contract with ICE, which to our understanding means that all the jails that they supervise, right, have that same kind of immigration enforcement in the same way that other sheriff county officials do as well, which is very bad for like local communities in these towns. Yes, and the person on the left, Anusha, was arrested as part of this action and is now facing a huge amounts of restitution because of it, which we talked about before. You know, I think it's interesting to see how places, perhaps like, you know, Bristol, places like Milford, which is like, right, if people don't know what Milford is, like, if you go up through one socket, it's like, Milford's right there. I don't think they've ever seen actions like these before. And the ways that they're dealing with them in court is ridiculous. You know, we'll talk about it more, but it's, you know, I think depending on, you know, how comfortable you are with action and taking action, but it's interesting to figure out how they're going to deal with things in court, right? Because when you're doing a campaign and you're doing something that breaks the law or that they don't like and want to, like, you know, prosecute you for it, turns out most places are going to react in a very harsh way. Some places are better, obviously, because they're used to direct action, they're used to dealing with it. Like DC, like San Francisco, or whatever. I'm not saying that like people are never prosecuted there, but you know, convicted harshly. But they're definitely not on the level of like Bristol County and Milford, where you know they're just trying to throw everything to get you to never do anything again, basically. Yeah.
Is restitution like the primary form of retaliation they've had against you, as far as like the courts go?
Yeah, like in the history of FANG in general, restitution has been something that has been thrown at us quite a bit. You've gone for restitution before too. Yeah, restitution, jail time. Yeah, so those have been the things that we've most gotten. And I also think like a part of it is just FANG in general, which not to scare you from doing anything with us, but like there was a time when we were just environmental organizing, but we're doing actions on this particular pipeline, doing direct actions where folks were charged, what, $30,000 in restitution? We're getting charged $30,000 in restitution. And then if you like travel down the pipeline to West Roxbury, Massachusetts, where like famous people were getting arrested, they got speeding tickets essentially. And so we were getting charged with restitution. So it's also just like where you are and like the fact that we've been doing these actions, but other folks, when they started to do direct action, they weren't getting anything. And so I think that's also a thing to be mindful of. It was really funny because after that action in West Roxbury, I went to West Roxbury to like support them in a rally, and they're like, well, I don't think you're doing enough in Rhode Island. And I was like, you want to come pay $30,000 in restitution? So just also being really mindful of the history of work that people have also been doing, just being really humble, right? And just being really mindful that like people are trying their hardest no matter what tactics they're using, and just being patient with each other.
And one of the final actions that we did for the week of action was we went to Cape Cod and we put up a banner as well as a few photos calling out, because Barnstable, which is in Barnstable County, has a 287G. Cape Cod is part of Barnstable County. Wanted to call out, this was during the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. We want to make the link of, you know, the fact that trans women and trans folks are being detained in ICE detention across the country, and 2 trans women that we know of have died so far. So we wanted to, on this 50th anniversary of Stonewall, make that link and make sure that Cape Cod people that were passing by the bridge knew that Barnstable County has its 287G contract as well.
So this is outside of the courthouse before I went in for a 10-day sentence for the action. And I think just speaking to what you were asking before about like the restitution and the jail time, the whole court process was just, basically they were just out to get us in whatever way they could. And in that specific case, I had offered to pay restitution, and then they rejected the restitution and said that we weren't going to take the restitution, we're going to just give you jail time. So they didn't, my judge that had my case had been giving campaign contributions to the sheriff for up until 2014, and then stopped, and there was like record of family members contributing to his campaign. So there's just a lot of corruption in Bristol County. It is very political. Back to like what Lee was just saying, like with these counties that we see, it's not like a coincidence that they're coming down harder. It's they're racist counties. They're judges. They're the people making the decisions about people's lives are really informed by the way they view people and the way they want their towns to be perceived and kept. So that was just very clear throughout the process. And I think another thing that I would emphasize with it was one thing that I learned as like a person with a lot of privilege going into a court system that hadn't experienced it before in that way, was just the way in which they kind of use pleas against you. And when I got into jail, it was like everyone knew that. It wasn't like a new thing, but what was brought to light, and I think it's really important for people to just realize that all the time, is that people are going to court all the time. Police can do whatever they want when they arrest you. They can charge you with whatever they want, and it's been a tactic that's being used so that people do take deals, and they don't have the ability to actually process everybody. They don't have the ability to take everybody to trial, so they set people up. So like in my case, they wouldn't drop my resisting arrest charge, so it was a 2.5-year like maximum jail sentence, and I was anxious about that, and so I ended up taking the trespassing charge, which was 10 days. And that's a situation that's happening to people all the time with drug charges, with petty theft, that the police can charge you with whatever they want. And then people come to court and they're like, okay, well, this is a better deal than getting a felony on my record, so I'll take this sentence. And that was not new to anybody that I was in jail with, but it was very new to me. And so I just feel like it's an important thing to continue to recognize for people. And I guess I just want to take like a minute right now, or no, it's coming up later in our slides, so that's it.
It's the next slide.
It's the next slide. So when I was there, I met a lot of people who were extremely enthusiastic about us fighting Bristol County. And I just want to highlight a couple of things that was written in a letter from one of the people that I met. So she introduces herself. Bristol County houses 150 women. Well, I'll just read this. I'm one of 150 women who reside at Dartmouth's 400 Funds Corner Road. Many of us here have made some bad decisions, but that doesn't make us bad people. Despite our mistakes, we should not be subjected to some of the problems and conditions we face in this jail. Just because we are caged does not mean we are animals and should not be treated as such. I would like to share some of these current issues that we face here. I was in the hospital septic prior to being incarcerated on blood thinners, steroids, and other medications. It took 31 days for them to get me my medical records. Inmates with psychiatric issues are not kept on their current medication. They were prior to incarceration. So people come in and they're totally stripped of all their medication. If you have, there are 14 days wait to see any medical for any type of care. The food is extremely unhealthy and designed to make you gain weight. That was even after the comments that the food had improved tremendously from the hunger strike, and people commented on that and noticed a difference. And there are no healthy alternatives from commissary. A lot of commissary items are full of sodium and preservatives and saturated fats, and just the price and the cost of commissary and phone calls is outrageous and really high, and also continues to separate people from their families because people don't have the money and the ability to contact people on the outside. So we posted this meme about the medical conditions, and also posted the letters on the Shutdown ICE website, which you can read the full letter of this person and another person as well.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep reading letters. So the other person who served 10 days wrote a statement.
Because they can't be here with us right now. They're in school and away, far away from me. Yeah. I don't know if they want people to know everything.
So this is a statement that Amory wrote. One thing I want to stress about my experience at Bristol County Jail is that no matter who I was put with, I always found myself taken care of, by other inmates, of course. The correction officers were pricks. Since I got my legal gender changed during transitioning until booking, where I let them know that I'm trans, I was put with men who are all lovely people and who I enjoyed sharing conversations with and getting to know. One egregious and clumsy strip search later involving multiple male and female COs. They kept me in the medical unit for 3 days by myself, where I couldn't shower, go to rec, or use a phone. When I asked, they said they were figuring out where to put me. After our lawyer, thanks Jim, strong-armed them, they brought me to the women's unit, claiming their policy was to house people with whatever's below the belt. Though when I asked for this policy in paper, they wouldn't give it to me. Nonetheless, the C-Wing Women's Unit was where I met some of the chillest people I've ever met in my life. Not only were they completely cool with the trans thing, they were very supportive of the action, which brought me there, and were really easy to make friends with. They thwarted the jail's transphobic attempts to make my stay more uncomfortable than it had to be, and because of them, despite the CO's aggressive incompetence, I look back on the experience as one of the most vivid and cherished weeks of my life. So, yeah, I guess one other thing I'll just point out from that statement is just that the medical unit is basically solitary. It's cold, and they keep the lights on all the time, and it's a way that they separate people within the jail.
And one more thing about Amory's situation, during sentencing, our lawyer did request that he be held in a trans facility, and the judge had agreed, and Bristol County made the choice not to listen. So just also just wanting to raise awareness about that Jim had to fight for it and ask for it, and even tell the judge what the appropriate language was to allow for this to happen, and then Bristol County did not listen at all.
That's me. This was during one of my court cases, court dates.
Yeah, and I guess just in general, again, my trial will be on January 7th and January 8th, and we're asking everyone to come out to both days, because both days are extremely important, not just one of the days, but I also recognize like work and life. If you are able to come, we're asking people to sign up, not because we're trying to keep tabs on you, but because we're worried about parking and transportation, and so June and I are trying to figure it out, and so we might, it's just more or less sending logistical information about information that we may have found out in terms of that. And I guess like this like court process, much like anybody else's court process, so I don't want it to make it sound like for us, we had to go through this situation, we chose to do this action, and or going through the process, but just again want to raise up how shitty Bristol County is and how awful the court system there is, and if you have the opportunity to support anybody else who's in the courtroom, please do and be present there. We've had people come out to support me, but we've had people stay after I've been seen to support people who are still in those rooms. And we also have been asking people who are coming to support us if they have the financial means to bring cash with them so that we can pay petty fines for people when we're there during our court dates, so that people there are not then being arrested just because they can't pay like a $75 fine. We can pay that for them. And so if people have the financial means and are coming out on any of these days, please bring cash, and we'd love to be able to support people as they're going through their court cases while we're there. And this is like a big thing, just like, I think a lot of people think about the action, they plan the action and they do the action. We try to support our friends. Sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not the best at it in terms of jail support, court support. I think right now where we are in FANG is like we're in a lot of court support, heavy support for our friends. But that does not mean that we don't support our community, and everybody in that courtroom is our community. We're there to support them too. And so we're not better than anybody. If you're somebody in this room who's like, I can't wait to do direct action, don't forget that you're not separate from people. When people continue to isolate themselves and you get put into a cell, you're not any better than anybody else who's there just because you chose to be in there, right? And so just being really mindful of that if you choose to take action, and if you can't hold that duality in your mind, then maybe you shouldn't be taking action at all. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say about my court date. If people could come out, that'd be really great. If people are interested in joining my court support team, talk to June. In charge of the court support team. Yeah, so say that. So that's what I talked about. Do you want to say what?
I'll just add that it just makes a really big difference to have a lot of people filling the courthouse, and yeah, and it also takes a lot of courage to go to trial. It's a really big deal, and so if people do have the ability and capacity to come out, I really would encourage it, because it takes a lot to be cross-examined, and I think that just having people in the courtroom makes the judge nervous, and you can see it, especially hopefully if we get that one judge where you can see, no, not that one, but it makes a big, no, it makes a big difference to, no, I don't know that judge, but no, it makes a really big difference though to have people there and to witness both just everybody who's going through the process. I know like my mom came out for the case and she still talks about court, like how she cannot believe how much time and money is wasted in court. And I think it's a politicizing moment. So bring somebody who maybe isn't like that, like isn't politicized. Like bring people, let people see the way that the state is treating people on a daily basis, and then also let's support Cherry, who's going to trial and doing this and bringing a lot of people to the stand. So, yeah.
tweets.
I just also want to mention that Sherry had talked about like bringing cash if you can. Often we do that to pay for people's citations. When you're caught in New Bedford, Bristol County, New Bedford City, when you're caught driving without a license, they make you go to court, and then at court you're told pay a $60 fine and you're free to go. Most of the people that are caught driving without licenses are people that can't get one, aka people that are undocumented. So while Massachusetts is fighting to make sure that this bill that allows them to get licenses passes, we're trying to support that community in that way. Just paying for their fines because they can't get one. They know how to drive, they pass the test and all that, but they can't get a license. So that's how we're supporting folks while we're also doing court support at the same time.
And Lee has numerous times had to translate because there aren't translators there to support people. So if you have the ability to speak other languages, that's also helpful.
And so we just want to wrap up to let you know the ways that you can plug into the campaign. Well, we haven't planned out a direct action training here yet. Specifically, we've done plenty of direct action trainings in Providence, but there will be happening one in New Bedford where we had this, we talked about this stuff previously. That will be happening on the 20th of this month. So if you're interested in going to a direct action training there, where New Bedford is it's where it's happening. That's where we go to court. It's a wonderful city with great restaurants and corrupt individuals. But we'll definitely organize a direct action training later in Providence.
If you sign up, we'll email you.
Yeah, if you sign up, then the registration sheet over there will email all this information to you. But you can sign the pledge to take action, which basically means that you're willing to engage in taking action with us in some capacity, either in this campaign or on stuff related to Wyatt for our Morris campaign there. And just a note around taking action, right? We talked about things that we've done, and we talked about court support and how people are facing trial. Getting involved in direct action doesn't mean you're going to be arrested necessarily. There's plenty of parts that you can play to make sure that an action functions and goes smoothly and works out well.
Rotate.
Yeah, often those are the roles that you don't see in the picture that you show, but they're the roles that allow that picture to happen. And that take the picture. So
And upload it on the internet.
yeah, it's very important, right, that like if you feel like right now you're not able to take risk in that way, and take risk in maybe getting arrested for an action, even though that's never the goal, or not the goal here, but there's plenty of roles that people can fill that don't mean you have to take risk in that way. And you can find out more, sign a pledge to take action.
Find out more about the roles if you come to a direct action training.
Yeah, and then you can sign if you want to take any of those roles. But also, if you don't want to do it with us, we do encourage you to take autonomous action. Especially if if you live in New Bedford or someone there, you just happen to be, spend a lot of time there. There's plenty of places with these crappy agreements, and we do encourage, obviously, for continuous resistance, right? Because like we said, if we don't show that we're against these agreements, they're just going to keep happening. And we encourage people to organize actions. And if you want to donate to our campaign, if you have the ability to donate, that would be great. Donations allow us to keep carrying this campaign forward, paying for bail, paying for citations at court, buying equipment for actions, plenty of things. So
We need equipment.
Yeah,
It's
if you were-
currently being held in the Homeland Security.
every time they do actions, they take our equipment and we have to get more. So you can
And
support
we're
it
not
that way.
great case. We don't just kidding.
If you can support it that way, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you to everyone that's already, and in the audience are obviously a lot of folks that have participated in actions, done stuff with us. So thank you so much for
Court support team.
our court support teams. Thank you so much for allowing this work to happen. And if you want to find out more about the campaign or you didn't understand something, we have a website called shutdownicenow.org, which basically summarizes a lot of the things that we talked about today in one nice little nifty website that you can share with people. And you can, a lot of, there's links and pictures and good information there, so feel free to visit that website. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with all of just different next steps. But we do encourage folks to keep taking action, or to start taking action, or to hit us up to figure out how. It's not gonna end until we make it end. It's been happening, these agreements have been around since '96, thanks to Bill Clinton, and they're gonna keep happening because of this public safety push from these racist sheriffs. But we hope, that people in New Bedford can figure out how to kick out the sheriff, but we know that another racist one can just pop up in his place. So we have to figure out how to end that program in these places in general,
I feel like it's like a little plug that they're looking for someone to run.
We're not plugging for people to run against, so the sheriff also runs unopposed every year. So that's another thing that's been happening, but we're not gonna make a plug for that, but does anybody have any questions?
If you're a cop.
If you wanna run and then abolish the role,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I think you have to be a cop first to run for sheriff.
Do you really?
We don't know anything about that process. Any other questions? Great. We'll be around for a little bit longer if people want to talk to us, but thank you so much for listening to us talk to you for a really long time. And you want me to ask again? No. Did I not pause? I'm not. Does anybody have any other questions? Pausing longer. Yes.
I know that you talked about this a little, the Suffolk County prison sending or closing its, and ending its agreement to house ICE detainees for people being sent elsewhere. I was wondering what you all have kind of heard about the ramifications of that. My understanding is that it wasn't really political, they just weren't filling beds, and it was like basically a financial decision.
So Suffolk County was losing money and they weren't actually getting money from their contract agreements. And what actually happened instead, which I think we can talk about more, if I don't answer it fully, is that they did get funding to open a women's facility. So now they're going to be housing so it's like a program, but essentially they're still incarcerated. And they were going to make more money off of that program than they were from these agreements. And so that's what eventually happened.
But so what's been, I mean, obviously it's been hard for people who maybe were close to their families and now they're farther. I'm just curious as to what that effect has been in terms of the effect of people.
So those folks who are being housed there will be housed at Bristol County, and I think once they're in Bristol County, we'll have a better idea of who they are because we'll have a closer relationship to that facility than Suffolk. And there's also people in Suffolk who are monitoring, who have already been organizing there, monitoring where those folks are going. And we bumped into them at the New Bedford event.
Yeah, and we got reports that people from Suffolk, apparently we're going to start phasing people out in December, but they already started. They're going to Bristol, as Sherry mentioned, they're coming to the Wyatt, and we've also got reports that they've been sent to upstate New York, near Buffalo, to the detention center there. So yeah, people are being sent out to other places, and that's just talking, I think, a little bit more about like strategy, the unfortunate effect or consequence of ending a contract. In their case, they say it's not because of pressure, it's not because of like we're anti-Trump, it's because it's a cash, it's a money thing, right? An IGSA contract is about money.
Yeah.
If you're not making any money off of it, kick it off and get another thing, a grant that'll give you money to incarcerate people. And I think that there's a lot of people, I should say that a lot of people oppose shutting down detention centers or ending contracts because of this effect of, well, the whole system's messed, so they're just going to be transferred further away, or they're going to be sent down south where there's less resources, right? Or less opposition to this anti-immigrant xenophobic rhetoric. But the goal is that, we're shutting all these places down. I mean, I can't say this is the goal of the campaign, but within the larger, anti-detention movement is to shut down these places and these agreements to force a change, right, to happen. And are people going to be sent down to the south or places where, it's less favorable conditions? Yeah, probably. But that means that we have to support them in shutting those places down too, right? If there's nowhere to hold them, where are they going to go? So, we're forcing that crisis to happen, right? In terms of just release them. Detention does not need to exist. It's alive, but detention needs to exist. So, yeah, it's just, I guess, a little bit rant around. Because a lot of people talk about also with the white, we can't shut it down, they'll just get transferred. Yes, but we need to continue the struggle of shutting down everything. That's the goal.
I think that's the goal. I think that's the goal of the campaign.
There's different ideas and there's different thoughts about it, but I just wanted to share that because it often comes up when we talk about shutting down and ending contracts.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that, I think it's important also in the context of talking about the Wyatt too, that Bristol County is acknowledged and also really centered because of the ripple effect of where people are moved and stuff. So I think it's really important to be informed about all the area, all the places, at least within this area, that we can be targeting, and then also, of course, the south as well.
People from the south sending people to the north.
Right.
Sorry. People are being moved a lot.
Yeah. Texas is sending people all over the place.
Yeah, but the campaigns aren't isolated and the jails aren't isolated, and just like that, these aren't isolated issues, they're all connected. And so if you're talking about detention, you're talking about incarceration. If you're talking about shutting down one place, you're talking about problems in another place. It can't be looked at as individual issues because they're not.
But yeah, and I just want to mention that even though there's less resources there, places like Louisiana, places like Alabama, Texas, obviously, huge fights to shut places down. Florida, huge fights to shut places down. So it's not like we're only doing this here, they're down there, if they go down there, there's nothing for them. There are people actively, supporting people down there. Do they have less resources? Yes. It's important that we support their work, but things are happening down there as well.
And it's important that we're in communication.
Yeah.
Right. So when we got word that people who appeared and people contacted us, and then when we heard that people from the caravan were coming up to Boston, and people contacted us. It's also really important that we try to communicate with each other so that we're aware of where people are moving. Any other questions? Yeah?
So you said that people from Rhode Island are being detained in Bristol. Is it Rhode Island law enforcement that are doing that and then transferring them to Massachusetts law enforcement? Or does that question make sense?
So how are they ended up in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
It's just, they have a process. I mean, every single state has ICE agents, that are allocated for the state, and they're federal agents, and so once they know where a person lives, and they have a warrant out for them, they grab them however they can, and they take them to processing centers in Rhode Island, where they determine, figure out what their case status is and where they're going to go. And from there, a van from Massachusetts will come to this processing center, grab them, and take them to Massachusetts.
Okay, and is that van the local law enforcement that has the contract?
Yes.
Okay, so it's ICE agents that do the rounding up here, and then it gets transferred to the. So I was just wondering if there was law enforcement people from Bristol coming to Rhode Island.
They are, yeah.
But not to do the arrest, it's a post process.
Yeah. And that's because, 287Gs do not give the authority for them to serve out, I don't even want to say they don't do it, but we haven't seen or heard of police officers serving immigration warrants.
There's another part of that law that applies to like municipal police officers that is not used because it's of questionable constitutionality. So
yeah.
with this 287G, it has to be they act as ICE officers in the place of detention.
Exactly.
In the house of correction.
My lawyer.
They used to be able to, and there was so much like flag against it, right?
Yeah, and I think that was wrapped up with the the really racist law that was passed in Arizona.
Yeah.
And I think like those parts of the law aren't challenged as part of that process.
So yeah, to your question, no, they're not doing that. They're not serving the warrants, but they do transport individuals.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Great.